Good morning, KWRA. Today, the people here in front of you, Debbie Dennis, Gary Griffith, and Jessica Swaffer are going to do contract presentation for you live and live. So enjoy yourselves, listen intently. This will be on YouTube, and so you'll be able to go back. You can use this for reference. Is that, Jessica, will these stay on there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I can use it for reference.
Yeah, so those of you who are newer listening to this is going to be really cool for you, because we know until you really start writing contracts to have a reference to go back to. These guys do it the best that you've ever seen. So with that, with no further ado, you've got it. Action.
Thank you very much. For today's presentation, I am going to act as an agent, and Debbie Dennis is going to act as a concerned mother, and her daughter is Jessica Swaffer, and they are purchasing a property, and we're going to go through the contract presentation as we would hopefully do it in today's digital world, and when we can't sit down in person. I still think sitting down in person is the best way to present a sales contract, but based upon the way we're having to do things today, this is the way that it is getting done. So let's dive into this and see what we have with regard to this presentation. And if I can open my screen, there it is. So here we go. And I am explaining to Debbie and Jessica the essence of a contract. And before we get into the contract itself, Jessica and Debbie, I wanted to let you know that we need to acknowledge the fact that you have been exposed to the disclosures on this property, the condition of the property, and the box that is checked on this particular page shows that you did and have had a chance to examine that. Do you understand that?
Yes.
Yes.
The next box that is checked is the fact, the notification that this property was built after 1978, and therefore it is exempt from any lead-based paint exposure, so you will not have to worry about lead-based paint in this property. So these documents will be signed by both you and Jessica, Debbie, and will be signed by the sellers also. And this page then becomes part of our documentation so that we can prove that you were exposed to the disclosures as is required by real estate license law. Okay?
Okay.
Let's get into page one of the contract. Page one of the contract talks about the fact that this is a legal contract for the sale of real estate. If you are uncomfortable with anything that I explained to you today or that you see and feel like you need to present it to an attorney, it is your right and your responsibility to do that if you so desire. So at any time, if you want to say, hey, wait a minute, before I sign anything, I want my attorney to look at it, that is perfectly permissible, because what we're doing here is tendering an offer on a piece of property, and this offer will become a contract if it is accepted. There are obligations, there are responsibilities, there is a timeline to get to the closing table, and there are consequences if we don't follow the timeline, and those are what we're going to explain today. So if you stay with me here, this will be a logical timeline delineation of how we get from this point to the closing table. Basically, what we have here is a contract that will include conventional financing. We are disclosing here that we are going to apply for a conventional loan, and that is the box that is checked at the top of the page. We then identify the sellers of the property, and we identify the buyers of the property. And one thing here, and I will say this outside of our presentation right now, it is a best practice for you to get, for any agent to get legal names for the participants in the contract. If we have the buyers, then I would want Deborah Dennis and Jessica Swaffer probably to include your middle initials, so it would be a complete legal name. This will make processing, completing other paperwork, getting the deed ready for signatures and things of that nature will be a lot better if we have the complete legal names of the people involved. We don't have that right here, but that's okay. We'll go ahead just as if that is their complete and legal names. But we are identifying the parties to this, and we are saying that if we come to an agreement, if signatures are signed, that we agree to follow through with the restrictions of the contract and with the requirements of the contract, and that we will accept the property by a general warranty deed if all parties agree and we get to the closing table. We're going to now identify the property. It is located in Tulsa County. We have the legal description of the property and we have the address of the property, so we can cross-reference those to make sure we're actually buying the house that we think we're buying here. We have already determined that we are going to make an offer of $215,000 for this property, and it is reflected in here that we are going to pay $215,000, and we're going to put up $2,000 worth of earnest money. This is money that we are putting in an escrow account so that the seller knows that we are serious in trying to purchase this property. He is going to be taking it off of the marketing. It will be coming out of MLS as an active listing. So we are serious about this, and we're willing to offer $2,000 to get this process started so that he feels comfortable in accepting our offer. This earnest money, by the way, should we get a signed contract, all parties agreeing to sign it, this earnest money check will be deposited in the escrow account at the listing brokerage, and the money will be deposited, so it is not something the check is being held until some later date. It will be deposited, and you need to understand that and make sure that it does clear when we get an agreement, or when we get the agreement. We have decided that we'd like to close this property on the 26th of June. And if there's some circumstances come up that are out of our control that delay the closing process, we're willing to allow this to happen for 5 days. This could be things such as weather-related issues where travel becomes impossible. Right now, we're working under the COVID-19 rules, and they could cause some kind of a delay in the closing process. So we're willing to allow up to 5 days from this 6/26 to meet all the requirements to get this to a proper and legal closing. And that once we close on this property, the possession will be transferred to us to you at the time and the conclusion of the closing process, which also, by the way, includes funding. We're going to close it, and it is going to be funded. So the sellers will get their money at the time of closing. If any of this does not happen, then the closing will not happen. So if the funding doesn't happen, the closing itself might be delayed until the funding actually does come through. We need to understand that before we get into it, because there are certain elements. Sometimes funding comes from the East Coast or the West Coast. If we're closing late on a Friday afternoon, the funding entity may be closed, and the funding wire has not been transferred yet. So there are things that can happen. It doesn't mean it won't close. It just means that if it doesn't happen in a timely fashion, it may be delayed a day, possibly 2 days, if we don't have the proper amount of funding. Does that make sense to you at this time?
Mhm.
Yes, Gary, can I ask a question?
You may.
Is there any chance that maybe we can close before that close date, or is that, the drop dead close date?
Absolutely, we can close any time on or before the 26th of June. If we have all the paperwork done, the loan process has been completed, then and the sellers are willing and able to get out of their house sooner, as long as everybody agrees, we can move this closing date upward or backward. It doesn't really matter as long as all parties do agree to it. So if we see that we are ready to roll in far less than the 26th of June, all we have to do is ask. If it gets agreed to, then we can, at that time, proceed to the closing table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. As we move on to page number 2, we're going to assume that accessories, equipment, and systems, the fixtures and appurtenances that go with the property are going to stay with the property. We are assuming, and this is a long list of things that can be assumed to stay with the property. If we find there's something else that we would like to stay with the property, we could include that in the line paragraph 4A. If there was something that we thought we might like to have in addition to the things that are left there that might not normally stay, then we could ask for them at this time.
Well, Gary, since we were in the property, Jessica and I have talked, and Jessica really would like to have the refrigerator.
The refrigerator, there are two ways to look at this. The refrigerator is not such a high ticket item that it should raise the eyebrow of an appraiser if he goes out to look at the property. I think we could include the refrigerator in paragraph A there and not have any problem with the contract. Another way to do it is to do what we call a chattel agreement, where we have an agreement that is separate from this document that states that the seller is willing to sell you the refrigerator for a minimal price of $1 upon closing of the property, so that it actually can come that way. And we can certainly add a chattel agreement if that's something that you would like to do. What we don't want to do is fill this line up with things that are not considered real estate. If there were a $10,000 lawnmower in the garage that you wanted, and we put that in this line here, then the appraiser is going to say, wait a minute, that's not real estate. So I'm going to subtract $10,000 off of my mortgage, or off of the sales price here, because they're not borrowing at all for mortgage purposes. So refrigerator, we can do a chattel agreement. We can certainly do that if that's something. We'll ask for that, see if the seller is in agreement to do that. He didn't offer to leave it in the listing agreement, so this would be an item of negotiation.
Okay.
Okay.
That would be good.
The next paragraph, paragraph 5, this is the engine that runs the contract. This is establishing a time reference date, what we call a time reference date, which means that if we have 30 days to close, or 60 days to close, or 20 days to get loan approval, all those days start running on the 30th of October, 30th of April. So starting the 30th of April, we are under the gun to complete all the time requirements that we're outlining in this contract. Okay. Now, we also I need to make sure you understand that the real estate agents, all of us involved in this, have making no representations with regard to the conditions of this property. This is something that the seller has disclosed to you what he knows, and we will have our time to do investigations and our own inspections to see if we can discover something else. But I'm certainly making no representation with regard to the conditions of this property. Just understand that that is a discovery process that we will be going through. Okay.
Okay.
Paragraph 7, we're going to have 15 days. We've asked for a little extra time because inspectors are busy, and because of the COVID-19, it's taking a little longer to do inspections. So we're going to ask for 15 days, starting from our time reference date, which was the 30th. So we're going to have 15 days from the 30th to do our inspections on the property. What that means is we're going to have those inspections completed and a report made by, that'll be what, May the 16th, because we have to turn in 15 days starting on the 30th. So the 1st of May will be day number 1. And then we have 24 hours after the expiration of 15 days to get a report into the sellers if there's anything that we find and we want them to address. Okay, are you with me here? So we're going to hire anybody that we feel comfortable with. If you know somebody that you feel comfortable with that is an expert that you want them to look at the house, they certainly will be allowed to enter on the property to take a look at the situation. There are recommendations that you see in paragraph 7B of things that can be and probably should be looked at to see whether they're pertinent to your desires with regard to this property, the type of inspections that can be done, or there's even a line there if there's some other inspection that is not listed there that you want done. We could add that in there.
Gary, after that storm last night, we sure want the roof looked at and some other things as well. I don't know who does that, and I'm not sure Jessica does either. Can you give guidance on that?
I can provide a list of inspectors that provide full service inspections, or we can piecemeal inspection. We can hire a roof inspector. We can hire electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. There are several ways to go, and I will help you make those decisions.
Okay.
You can pick and choose from the people that I feel comfortable with referring to you, and that you feel comfortable with in using, and we'll get those people assigned to come in and take a look at the property. Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds good.
As we move on down in page number 3, paragraph C, we're going to talk about treatment, repairs, and replacements. We need to be notified the fact that the termite talks about if there's any termite inspections are usually limited to the structure and the garage that we are dealing with. If there are any other structures on the property and we want them to fall under the inspection category, we would need to have them included. I don't believe there is an outbuilding on this particular property, so there is no need to worry about that. But generally speaking, termite damage, termite treatments are confined to the structure itself. Paragraph C2 talks about the fact that we are going to have within 24 hours of the expiration of the time period. Remember, we had 15 days to do the inspections. We've got 24 hours from the expiration of that time to notify the sellers of what our intent is with regard to moving on with this contract.
Gary, what happens if we do the inspections and there's just a whole lot of work to be done? Can we cancel and get our earnest money back, or do we have to move forward? What are our options at that point? Is this what that's talking about?
Would be addressing that. Paragraph 2A talks about the fact, as you see on the page there, paragraph 2A, if you have your inspections performed, you get the inspection reports back, and there is something that is unsatisfactory in your eyes that you just don't like, you're uncomfortable with, you may cancel at this time and receive your earnest money back and go on down the road and try to find a house that meets your needs. So this is our opportunity to get out of the contract. It doesn't matter whether the seller would be willing to fix what's wrong. It's just a matter of you're uncomfortable. I no longer want to purchase this house, and this is your avenue to get out of this. We're going to provide the seller with a copy of all of these reports that we have had done, because there may be something there that he might have to reveal to the next buyer that comes along. So we're going to give him a copy of all our reports, and then we're going to say, we don't want the house. Or we're going to exercise paragraph 2B saying, hey, we've completed our inspections and we are willing to go forward on this house if certain things are done to the house. And here's where we would list those items that you have found that you didn't agree with. A system that is not working, a hot water tank that is not working. We're not looking for cosmetic things here. We don't want the walls painted a different color. We don't want the toilet paper turned around on the roller. We want it to be a system failure, something that is not functioning normally as it was designed to do. And those are the things that we can list on a form and present it to the seller and say, if these things are not fixed, if we can't work out an agreement to get these things fixed, then we want out of the contract. Or if you will fix them, we will continue on with the contract. And we're going to have 7 days to negotiate those repairs. The seller is going to be able to look at what you want done and get his own bids. You can look at, get your own bids on the work to gets to be done. And we must come to an agreement within these 7 days of presenting this information to the seller, or the contract will go away and become null and void, and the earnest money will be returned, and we will not have a contract any longer if we can't come to an agreement. So the items that we put on our TR need to be what we consider to be deal breakers. If these aren't fixed, if these aren't addressed, I don't want the house. And if the seller is unwilling to fix them, then we're not going to have a contract, and we're going to have to go find another property. So these need to be major items.
So Gary, if Jessica says there's certain things I can't live with, and the seller says, well, take it or leave it, I'm not going to fix it, then you said she gets her earnest money back. Does she get her inspection money back? Because she's going to pay for these inspections, I think.
No, the only money that will be refunded to her would be the earnest money. The cost of inspections, that is your discovery, to discover things that are maybe in addition to what the seller has already told us about the house. If we come up with some kind of a big item, it's something that the seller may not have known about. So, but these are cost of inspections, and the cost of re-inspections are all at the buyer's expense at this particular point. So this is the money that you will have invested in buying a house, and it's a whole lot better to probably have spent a little money up front rather than wait until you've been in the house a month or two and have to come up with a major expense and spend a lot of money to get something fixed. So I realize it will be a hit, but it is also one that is going to save you money in the long run should something not be discovered and you move into the property.
Jessica, this is kind of like that $300 you spent when you took that car to the mechanic and he said, this is a terrible car, don't buy it. You didn't get your $300 back, but you didn't buy a terrible car either. Is that right,
Okay,
Gary? Am I
yeah.
saying that right?
That's right. We're buying a used
I
house
get
here.
it. Okay. Okay, I
Almost
get
the
it.
same. Okay. If we move on down to the contract, paragraph D, 3D talks about the expiration of our rights to cancel the contract. If this 15 days pass and we haven't done anything and we are out of our contract, we're out of our inspection dates, it is assumed that we're going to go forward with this contract and we're going to accept the property in the condition that it exists. So I have to protect you by delivering the reports and delivering the request for repairs to the sellers within this time period. If we don't do that, if something doesn't happen, then what means we're going to go on forward with this, and come heck or high water, this thing is going to go to the closing table. So we need to make sure that we understand that this work has to be done. These inspections have to be completed. The reports have to be made. Our decision has to be made within our inspection time period, which is those 15 days. So it's very important that we follow the guidelines, follow the timeline that this contract is outlining for us. It is my responsibility to make sure you guys do that. So I'm your partner on this deal. I'm not going to let you fail. I'm not going to let you let something slide by. I'm going to be bugging you to say, hey, we got the inspections done, and I'm going to help you get those done. That's why you have an agent helping you get this process to the closing table. Okay. As we move on, we see the risk of loss here. And until we have possession of the property and the title is in our name, if anything happens to this property, it's going to be at the expense of the seller. In other words, until we get up from the closing table and have the keys in our hand, something goes wrong with that property, it's the seller's responsibility. Once we take possession of it, it becomes our responsibility, and our insurance would be involved, and we would be involved in the repairs from that. So on the way to the closing table, if a fire truck comes by and headed to your house that you're buying and it burns down, that's the seller's responsibility. After we get up from the closing table and the fire truck passes you by, that might be our responsibility at that time, because we have taken possession once we get up from the closing table and have the keys in our hand. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Next page has to do with the title evidence. The seller is going to bring his abstract up to date, and we're going to have the opportunity to examine that abstract and make sure that it is clear and that he can offer clear title to the property. We have opted here to get a commitment of insurance, issuance of a title insurance policy on this. We had two choices, an attorney's opinion or a title insurance policy, and you all chose at this time to do a title insurance policy.
Gary, can you revisit what's the difference in that? Why do we want title insurance versus an attorney's title opinion? I don't understand.
I will explain to you the best way I possibly can. We have the right to have an attorney look at this abstract and see if he thinks it's okay. And he will examine the abstract and he will give his opinion of whether something is okay. If we get ready to sell this house 15 years from now and we put it on the market, and the next person that examines it finds some kind of a title conflict, he's going to say, hey, this title conflict needs to be resolved. And then now it's going to be up to us to resolve the title conflict at our expense. We can go back to the attorney if he's still around and say, hey, Mr. Attorney, you missed this. And he'll say, okay, we can fix it, but it's going to cost us much money to fix it. If we get a title insurance policy and we can piggyback onto the mortgage lender's title insurance that they are buying on the property to protect them, we can piggyback onto their policy at a cheaper rate, and we can be covered up to the cost of the house for any fixation that needs to happen with regard to the abstract when it comes time to sell. So an attorney may have a bad day, but if we've got an insurance policy, that's going to protect us monetarily for in the future. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons why I recommend title insurance over an attorney's opinion. And neither one of you are attorneys, are you?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Well, that's good. I didn't want to take any money out of your pocket, but it's a little easier to collect from an insurance policy than it is to try to get an attorney to resolve an issue that maybe he overlooked when he read your abstract.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Seller's expense. We're going to have the abstract brought up to date, and it is going to be presented to us to have it examined, and it will generally go to the title company will get it, and the mortgage company will look at it, have their title insurance issued with regard to protecting them, and we can, as I said, we're going to piggyback onto their policy. The seller is going to pay for a uniform commercial code search, which means that there are no liens out on the property. He hasn't got some paying time for carpeting, things of that nature. So we're not going to have any, we're not going to move into this house and have people come forward and saying, hey, I did work on this house, I'm owed money. So we're going to make sure that there is none of that out there. And a mortgage inspection certificate is going to be performed. And if we're using a lender, the lender is going to send somebody out, a licensed surveyor out, to make sure the property exists, and it exists where we say it exists, and there doesn't appear to be any encroachments, any violations of any codes or any of that nature with regard to the construction. So the seller is going to do that. We would have the right, if we wanted to do a PIN survey. Which would be at additional expense, and it would be at a buyer's expense if we wanted to have that done. If we are located in a city that has been platted and everything is on record, I'm not necessarily sure that we need to do a PIN stake survey. And the mortgage inspection certificate, I think I would be comfortable with. If this were rural property where there was some concern as to where the property line is, I would say let's go and spend the extra money and get a PIN stake survey. So I don't think it is necessary with regard to in the city where it is a subdivision and everything is platted and everything is filed at the courthouse. I think it's pretty easy to find out where the property lines are. Okay. Once they bring the abstract up to date, we have 10 days to have our people look at it to see if there's any problem. And like I say, the mortgage company is going to be looking at it. They're going to might be making some title requirements to fix things that they find wrong in the abstract that has been brought up to date. And we also need to understand that there may be some utility easements on this property, and we need to be advised what they are. And we are accepting the property with those easements. In other words, you may not be able to put a building within X number of feet of your back fence because it could be a utility easement. So we need to recognize the existence of those easements. We should be notified as to where they are when we take a look at the survey, the plat certificate there, so we will know where these easements are. And but we need to realize that they exist, and we need to keep them open for the utility companies' use. Okay?
Okay.
Move on to paragraph E. If we find a title problem that has been identified and needs to be repaired, needs to be fixed, something needs to be done to clear this title so we can take possession of the property and have full ownership of the property. If we find something, we're going to be willing to allow them 10 days to get this title problem fixed. Now, 10 days is not very long time, but I understand that you need to be out of your apartment at a certain time, and you need to be in. We can't dilly-dally around and prolong the closing for over 10 days. So understanding that if we find a title problem, we're going to give them 10 days to get it fixed, and only 10 days. Yes.
Gary, if we find that, let's say it's something that's going to take 45 days and I can, maybe work it out, like everything's going really well with this house and I can work it out with my apartment to stay month to month. Can we still move forward, or does that 10 days, like once it runs out and the contract's over?
if you find that you can allow more than 10 days and it's okay, then we can go in and say, hey, we're willing to give more time.
Okay.
We may cancel the contract, or we also may extend it if we find that it is prudent to do that.
Okay.
Generally speaking, a title problem that can be resolved in 30 days or less is a very minor issue that involves maybe getting somebody's signature somewhere that they forgot to get when they changed the title around. It is not a major issue that's going to require probate or it's going to require something of that nature. So it's a solvable, quick solve situation on a title, and if it can be done in 30 days, then that's probably okay. And if you can work it out, then we can get it going. But if we see that it's going to be something that's going to take 2, 3, 4 months to resolve, then this is your way out of the contract, and your obligations are no longer in existence, and you can move on down the road. Okay.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
I'm glad.
Jessica, you can always come move in with me. You know that.
Okay.
We are going to look at paragraph 11, tax assessments and prorations. Generally speaking, we want all the taxes that are owed against the property to be taken care of up to the date of the closing, so that the seller is paying the taxes that he owes on the property up to that date of closing. You will assume the tax liability from the day of closing forward. This paragraph just points out to the fact that you're not going to move in to the property and inherit some kind of a tax liability, especially one that you didn't know about. And if there is a tax liability, we definitely need to have that out and get it resolved before we take the property. Okay. Paragraph 12, residential service agreement. The seller has been offering, or did offer, a residential service agreement. He says it's already on the property and he will transfer it to you at no additional charge. And it's going to give you 1 year of coverage on the major appliances or equipment that is in the house, your dishwashers, your hot water tanks, your heating and air conditioning, things of that nature. So you will have 1 year of coverage from the day of closing on this property at no additional cost to you. And that should give you a little bit of peace of mind with regard to moving in and a week later having your hot water tank go out. You would only have the service fee and not the cost of the repairs or the replacement to bear. So that is a good situation, and the seller is offering it, and we're going to take advantage of that with this offer. You understand?
Okay.
Okay. Paragraph 13 talks about additional provisions, and this would be where we would identify anything else that we needed to have delineated in our contract. And we do have a note in here that we need to see the finance supplement. And the reason we put that in there is because there is something in that financial supplement that is out of the ordinary. And that is the fact that we are asking for the seller to pay part of our closing costs. And that is when we look at our financial supplement, that amount will be delineated in there. So we'll go over that as soon as we get to the financial supplement. Are you with me?
Mhm.
Yes.
In the unlikely event that we move into this property, or somehow during the course of the negotiations, we have some kind of a dispute arise, paragraph 14 says that we will first submit this to mediation before just going to get an attorney and try to go out and sue somebody. We have a very good early settlement program here in Tulsa that for $5, the participants can sit down and try to mediate the situation and come to some kind of an agreement. It's far better to do that than it is to risk the legal costs involved in lawsuits and things of that nature. So the first thing that we, as the buyers and the sellers, will be agreeing to is if any dispute arises, we're going to sit down and try to resolve it logically in front of a mediation before we seek any other legal remedies. And I think this is a very good thing to realize and a good thing to become a part of, because it does help in resolving minor issues. Any questions about that? As I said when we started this, there are responsibilities that each party has with regard to this contract, and there are ramifications, and there are things that can happen if things aren't done. If either party breaches this contract and we don't close on this contract, then there can be some circumstances that are going to arise that are going to require some further action. If the seller does not do everything that the seller is supposed to do or has agreed to do by signing this contract, then we can cancel the contract, terminate the contract, give them back their abstract, get our earnest money back. And if there is something that we feel like we've been damaged, we can seek any kind of legal remedy that we are entitled to. For instance, if we have spent an inordinate amount of money on inspections and things of that nature, and the seller just changes his mind, says, I'm not closing, then I would suspect that one of those remedies would be that we would ask the seller to pay for those inspections, since he's the one that arbitrarily decided not to close. Doesn't happen often that one side just changes their mind and says, I'm not going to do it. But it may come up, and we will have remedies that we can pursue in the event that does come up. Also,
Gary?
yes.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Well, I wanted to ask, because you mentioned this before and you just mentioned it now, that we would return the abstract. Are they going to give us the abstract before closing, or how does that work? It makes me kind of nervous.
The abstract will be turned over to your care. I would not advise you to keep it on your person. I would advise you to have it stored in a title company that does abstract storage, because it is something that if you lose can be costly to rebuild. So we don't want to physically keep it in our hands, but it will be your abstract. It will be turned over to you. You will have access to it at any time that you want to. It just, like I say, I don't physically want you to keep it in your desk drawer.
But we won't have it before closing.
You won't have it before. It will not be your property at closing. It will be.
Okay.
It will be read by the title insurance company. The mortgage lender is going to have the abstract looked at. It will be in their possession. It'll be in a title company's possession, and they can store it on your behalf. So you'll always know
Okay.
where it is and know how to get a hold of it.
Okay. Sorry about my questions. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Well, I want you to be as informed as you possibly can and feel comfortable as you possibly can with regard to this process. So it's a big deal.
Okay.
You need to be as comfortable. And I assume that once we get through here, that you will probably have 3 or 4 different questions that will come up that we didn't get to, and you're going to be making a phone call, and that's perfectly okay too, because that's why we're here. With regard to any expenses and the release of earnest money, should this thing fall apart or should it not close because we decided we don't want the property within our time frames, then we will execute a release of contract and a disbursement of earnest money. And should there be some kind of a problem with regard to that, or a dispute over whether the earnest money gets released or doesn't get released, there are ways that we have that legally determine who gets that money, and we can go into those later. It is not a situation that arises often, but sometimes it could happen that the one side or the other decides that I'm not closing, I'm backing out, and the earnest money becomes, who gets the earnest money can become a problem, and we will take the legal means to make sure that this decision is made in accordance with the law as it exists now. Again, I wouldn't lose sleep over the fact of how this is going to happen. Just know that it may happen, and we have the remedies to make sure that it gets released to the proper person. On paragraph 17, delivery of acceptance of an offer or counteroffer, the buyer and the seller authorize their respective brokers, if applicable, to receive delivery of an accepted offer or counteroffer or any related addenda or documents. What this means is we're going to present this offer to the listing agent. They're going to present it to their sellers. Their sellers, if they sign it and send it back to me, that's the same thing as sending it back to you. If I receive it, that means we've got it. And if they agree to it, that means we bought a house and we're going to proceed to the closing process. So you're authorizing me to act on your behalf to receive and accept any offers or counter offers. So if I get it, you've got it. And I believe me, we'll get it to you most Scotias as often or as quickly as I get it. Any questions about that? We do not have a non-foreign seller here, so paragraph 18 really doesn't apply to us, but there can be tax liabilities if this were a foreign seller. that they may have some tax liabilities and the government would need to be notified that they are selling property. It really is not going to apply to our transaction here. The next page, we are putting in a termination of offer. In other words, if we don't hear back from the sellers by the 5 o'clock on the 29th, then this offer is going to be considered to be terminated. It's going to be, we may withdraw it earlier if we decide, but we are going to make sure that if we don't have an answer by the 29th, the offer is dead and we cannot be held responsible for for continuing on with the contract at this point. It's for our protection. We're going to hear back by a certain date. If we don't hear back, then we're free to go on down the road. This thing isn't going to move on and on, drag on and on, okay?
Okay.
Next situation here is just the identification of the parties, and this is where your signatures will go, and these can be done electronically. Once we decide that this is what we've agreed to or what we're asking for, then you will go in and electronically sign all of these things and share it back with me, and then we will present it to the listing broker at that time. So then the bottom part of this form just identifies the brokers and the agents that are involved in the contract, and it is nothing that you need to worry about. It is for our delineation to make sure we get the right information to the right people. That in a nutshell is the whole contract, with the exception of the financial supplement, which we will go into right now. If you have any questions about the first 6 pages so far?
No, you've done a great job of explaining.
Let's move on then to the financial supplement, because there's more fun to be had. And what we are identifying here is the fact that we're telling the seller that we are applying for a conventional loan, and we've identified the property that we're buying the loan for. This is to key this page with the other pages of the contract so that everybody knows that they go in hand. And we are going to be we're going to be applying for a conventional loan in the amount of $172,000, which is 20% down payment. So it's 20% of the 215. It's 80% of the $215,000 that we're offering for the property. So we are going to borrow $172,000, and we are going to have loan approval 10 days prior to the closing date. And the closing date we had was the 26th of June. So we need to make sure that by the 25th of June, we know that we have loan approval on this property. If not, our earnest money could be in jeopardy if we do not notify the seller that we need more time or we need something is going on. We need to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to get full loan approval on this property. And that loan approval means that we have done everything. We've jumped through every hoop that the mortgage company has put in front of us, and we have diligently sought to get this loan. And we're going to have it all done by the 25th of June. If we don't have it done by the 25th of June, something needs to happen. We need to request more time from the seller, which, by the way, he may not allow. So we just need to make sure that we are doing everything that we can. Everything the seller asks, we provide as quickly as possible to make sure we have full loan approval within 10 days of the 26th of June. So we need to make sure that this is happening. Okay. Within 5 days, if we find out within the first 5 days of the contract that, of the time reference date that we have on the 30th of April, if we find out that there's something that has been misrepresented to us by the lender, there is something that is wrong, we don't agree to, the interest rate is not the same, something has changed, we can change our mind and say, hey, we do not agree to the financial circumstances here and we want out of this contract, and we can get our earnest money back and go on down the road. After those 5 days, we are going to, by not doing anything, we acquiesce to the fact that we're accepting the loan terms that we can find, and we're going to go ahead with this property. We're also telling the seller, or we're not telling the seller, we're telling the lending institution, hey, there are 4 items that you need to do within 10 days. The 4 items are review and approval of our creditworthiness, confirmation that we've paid our initial processing fees, property appraisal has been ordered, and that the loan approval is not subject for us selling or closing on another property. That information needs to be provided and needs to be available to the seller within 10 days of our contract. So we need to, like I say, we need to jump on it, need to get with the lender, make sure the process is started so that the seller can't come back and say, hey, you're not diligently pursuing a loan because you haven't paid for your appraisal. You haven't ordered the appraisal. You haven't paid any of your, you haven't provided any of the documents that the lender needs. So we need to make sure that we are doing what needs to be done. And if we don't do what needs to be done, the seller can come to us and say, guys, you haven't done what you said you were going to do with regard to getting loan approval, and I'm going to cancel the contract unless you get me this information. So we need to make sure that we're doing what the seller what the contract is telling us to do, and providing that information to the seller so that they know. Now, I'm not saying you provide it to the seller. The agents will deal with this. We will be making the phone calls to determine that this situation is under control and this information and the requirements have been met. So we will, like I say, we're going to run your timetable for you. We're just going to keep reminding you of that timetable to make sure you provide the information that is required within the time limits that we're talking about. In the event that the property comes back, in paragraph 2 here, the property comes back and does not appraise for $215,000, if it doesn't appraise for the full purchase price, you have the right to cancel the contract. You don't have to buy a property that doesn't appraise for what you agreed to pay for the property. So we would need to deliver some notice that we're either canceling the contract, or we might say we will go ahead and continue with the contract if you reduce the purchase price to what the appraised value is. So if the appraisal comes in for $210,000, we ask the seller, let's reduce the purchase price to $210,000. If they agree, we continue on with the contract. If they say, nope, we can't do anything, we've got to have $215,000, then we've got a situation we're not required to buy the house. If you still want it and have the financial means to pay more than the appraised value, that is okay too. You could go forward with it. In our marketplace right now, it is not the common practice to pay over appraised value for a property, because that money has to come out of your pocket and you have to prove that you have it. So it's a loan qualification situation still, that you qualify for the 215 and you've got the excess over the appraised value. It's not common practice in Tulsa right now. It is in some other markets, and they actually do pay over appraised value in some of the markets, but it is not common practice in Tulsa right at the moment. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Okay. We have talked about how much it costs to get in, how much the buyer's closing costs that we have previously, and you know that there will be an investment that cash that you will have to pay. And they include things like loan closing costs, first year's hazard insurance, tax and insurance escrows, and we'll be paying interest from the day of closing to the end of the first month. So we've already talked about those things when we discussed the cost to buyer that I presented to you earlier.
Okay.
In paragraph 4, in the event that the seller agrees to buy the buyer's prepaid expenses or escrows, the seller's current portion of the real estate ad valorem taxes shall not be included in the buyer's total prepaid expenses. That's not going to come into play with regard to ours, because we are not doing that. We're not buying the buyer's prepaid expenses or escrows. So don't worry about paragraph 4. Paragraph 5, however, is something that is very important to this transaction. Now, we're asking the seller to pay on our behalf $5,000 worth of closing costs for prepaids, escrows, and other costs related to closing. So the seller is going to be paying $5,000 of that money that it's going to cost us to get a loan on this property. And that's what we're asking the seller to do. And do you have any questions about this?
Gary, what if they, I mean, do they have to do that? Or what if they come back and say they won't do it? Or, I mean, is that negotiable? I don't want to necessarily lose the house over it, but can we ask them to pay half if they say no? Or
What we are doing here is we are presenting an offer to them. They can modify this offer in any way and present it back to us. They can say, oh, we'll take 215, but we only want to pay $2,500 closing costs. At that time, then we will receive back their offer and we will make our determination of whether we're agreeing to it or whether we want to change some other form of the contract. The price can be renegotiated. The amount of closing costs can be renegotiated. All of this is up for grabs, up for us to make our determinations until we come to some kind of an agreement. Once everybody has agreed and signed off and initialed off, somehow reflected that they agreed to the changes that are made, then we have the contract and no changes will be made unless all parties agree to it. But so yes, we can renegotiate, we can reoffer, we can do any kind of thing until we have a signed agreement.
Okay.
I have a question, Jessica and Gary. Where did the $5,000 number come from? How did y'all arrive at that number?
I believe the lending institution said that the amount of money required that this buyer is probably going to be required to pay to get into this property was somewhere in the neighborhood of $6,500. And Jessica only had $1,500 in her bank account, and she wanted $5,000 help on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, good. Okay. So you've already talked to the lender and those are the numbers that he's telling you for her to get this loan.
That is correct.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Is this what we had agreed to when we were talking verbally and putting together this offer?
Yeah.
Are you comfortable in making this offer? And the reason I ask that is because once it is executed, like I said, there are responsibilities, there are requirements, and there are repercussions. And we just want to make sure that we're aware of what they are. And once we sign our names, that we are in agreement that this is what we're going to do and ask for.
Yes, I feel good with it.
I'm good.
All righty. Then I'm going to ask you to electronically sign all of these and initial in the places that are required, share it back with me, so then I can share it with the listing agent. We'll get the ball rolling and get you into your new property.
Oh, yay. I'm so excited.
Yay. Excellent.
All right.
Good.
Very fine. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Thank you, Gary.
You're welcome.
Good job. Good job.
Yeah, I thought that went well.
Went very well. So I'm going to stop the recording now. First, I'm going to say goodbye, everybody. Thank you for watching. We hope you find this to be a great resource. And I'm going to ask my leader just to stay on for a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I don't think it's going to let me stop because Tia's not on.
Uh-oh.
Okay, I'm going to leave because this is going to mess her up at the end. So great job, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
We're still meeting tomorrow, right? At 10?
Yes.
Okay.
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 All right.
See you then.
Bye.
Bye. I could get it to end.